My name is Dan Veitkus, and this is The Common Good Show, where we discuss the gift of life and explore everyday blessings through the lens of faith-based stories and real-life experiences. The Common Good Show is brought to you by Guadalupe Rosary in partnership with Maria Vision. Through these conversations, we discover the lessons and truths that have guided our guests to where they are today, what they have learned over the course of their journey, and how those principles can be applied to our lives in order to elevate people, either as a group or an individual, to reach their fulfillment in its entirety. This morning I have with me Father Adams. Father Adams, thank you so much for spending your time with me, for coming out. Why don't you introduce yourself for everyone?
All right, thank you very much. My name is Father Martin Adams. I'm a priest with a community called the Priestly Fraternity of St. Peter. And our charism that was given to us by Pope St. John Paul II was to preserve the traditional liturgy in the church. And so basically that's just what I do, like all day, every day. And that's where I draw all my spiritual nourishment to keep me going each day. So, yeah.
Is there a certain practice? Obviously, you have like liturgy of the hours and whatnot, but is there something for you specifically, maybe outside of the traditional practice of the church, that you do to ground yourself every morning, something that you kind of start your day with?
Yeah, I mean, so in our seminary, everything that we did in the seminary was the way that things have been done for a long time.
Okay.
And that was in order basically to give you a formation that you could preserve, the life of grace within you as a priest.
Yeah.
Because just like with any state in life, you're going to have like a lot of things that are going to be pulling at you. And so basically we have you have to stick to a very strict routine, and the things that you can't go without each day are spiritual reading, your daily rosary, and especially for priests, making a holy hour in front of the Blessed Sacrament every day. So basically I wake up as early as I can. I read, I do my scripture reading, I do my spiritual reading for at least 20 minutes. I'll do some study, I'll pray my divine office, and then I'll try and go do my holy hour after that. And if you do those things, that's how you will persevere and be happy ultimately through doing those things faithfully.
Is that before or after coffee?
That is interspersed.
Okay.
Coffee. Yeah.
What's the difference? Obviously you have the scriptural reading and whatnot, but what do you mean by spiritual reading?
So spiritual reading is actually, so this book here, wait, I don't know if I'm supposed to.
Yeah, go for it, please. Yeah, please.
So this book is called The Priest's Way to God by Father Eugene Boylon.
Okay.
It's kind of a rare book, but this book was written for priests, but like everything he says in it ends up being applicable to everyone we help in spiritual direction. And Father Boylon in this book talks about how spiritual reading is supposed to be its own specific thing each day. And so basically it can be a life of a saint, it can be a book about prayer. I remember this one priest told me, he said that when he had been in seminary, one of his spiritual directors told him that you should be doing an hour of spiritual reading each day.
Yeah.
And he broke it into, like each day you can break this hour into 20-minute segments, but you should always be reading a book of a saint, a book about Our Lady, a book on the Eucharist, and then some other book on prayer or something like that. So,
okay.
I try to always keep a life of the saint going, because that just gives me the very practical inspiration for how to stay motivated. But then also like a book that focuses on something specifically in your spiritual life, which probably interests you, but you don't feel like you don't know enough about. And then you just always have that going. Just always have some reading every day.
Is there one particular book right now that you're working through or working on? I
just finished, it's called Saint Among the Hurons. It's about the Jesuits in North America who came, and they were the first to spread the faith here. And it was about Saint John de Brebeuf. And so I just finished that one. I'm about to start a book on Saint Peter. Another Jesuit.
Yeah.
His name escapes me. And then I'm also reading this book by Father Eugene Boylon called Difficulties in Mental Prayer. And I've read it before, but it's one of the best books that was ever written about how to do meditation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we had chatted just a little bit, obviously, right before this started, about your movement or your calling into the priesthood and whatnot. And I'm interested, what sort of value did you find any initial value, or was that part of the draw, the kind of how strict your daily routine is when you were moving into that, or in today's day and age where a lot of what we do is chaotic and all over the place, especially with the younger generation, or like anyone like in the mid 40s and under, it can be pretty chaotic.
Yeah. What
sort of value do you think is there by having a really strict like daily schedule, morning schedule?
I think, in my opinion, if you're going to actually have a spiritual life, you have to have a routine. And that's something most people, I mean, when people come for spiritual direction, that's basically like what we tell them is do you have a routine? And what do you do in your routine? And if you don't have one, then you need to get one, or else you'll just flounder eventually. Yeah. So, yeah.
If someone's listening and they're like, I'll read my Bible every day, or like I try to, but they have absolutely no notion of how to start or where to go from there, what would be like a first step, or kind of, what would your first direction for them be?
So you're talking about like somebody who like just wants to start taking the spiritual life seriously, or like scriptures study seriously?
Yeah, the spiritual life.
The first thing I'd say is, well, I mean, it's always like you have to go case by case with everybody, but it's kind of like, I mean, you have to know your goal. I mean, that's what St. Ignatius of Loyola, his spiritual exercises, it's called the first principle and foundation. Yeah. And of course, like it's the only logical thing, which is that you can't plan your life if you don't know what your goal is. Yeah. Like if you don't know towards where you're going. Yeah. So you have to know why you're created, why you exist. And then once you realize that your whole life is for the praise, reverence, and service of God, then you can say, okay, so what do I need to do to fulfill that? And then, basically at that point, that's where you start to pick what reading you're going to do, what your prayer routine is going to be. But the absolute essentials that I'd say that like you have to start with is like 15 minutes every day of spiritual reading. Set a timer for yourself and like don't stop reading until that timer goes off. And then say the Rosary, 5 decades of the Rosary every day. Yeah. And if you do those and start to just live a sacramental life, go to confession once a month, like at the least, or at the least, most, I don't know, at least once a month, at least. And then go to Mass, make sure you're going every Sunday. Yeah. And I always tell people, unless it's absolutely impossible, you should rearrange your week to make daily Mass at least once more. Because of the Eucharist, basically everything in the entire universe is ordered towards the Eucharist. And it's like, if we really believe this, but we're only going to Mass once a week, and we could be going more, then, you should be going more. So, anyways, but we always are really careful to not overburden people, because we realize people, especially if you're really well-intentioned, you can easily go too far and break yourself, and it's at that point it's no good. But just like these things I think are reasonable. 15 minutes of reading, praying 5 decades of the Rosary, try to make it a daily Mass once more in a week, and then if you can start with those things, that's how God will speak to you. Is through especially your reading and your prayer. That's what St. John of the Cross says. Those are 2 windows of your soul, how God's light will enter. Yeah. So
that's awesome. And I think the Rosary is one of my probably favorite prayers. I think like if I had to pick one, longer form prayer, that would definitely be it. Good. And it's just like it's one of those ones where I've never been in a situation where, no matter how chaotic or crazy it was or whatever was going on, where if I just pause and take the 12 to 15 minutes or whatever it is to say the Rosary, every single time, by the end of it, it's just completely different.
Yeah. It's true.
And it's not that the situation has changed necessarily. Sometimes it has, but a lot of the times it's just I've either been able to center myself, ground myself, or it's just like had a new perspective about it, and I can just kind of just let it go.
Exactly. You're right.
Because you mentioned 5 decades of the Rosary. Do you ever pray them, like pick certain ones from like the glorious mysteries and whatnot and kind of put them together? That's super random, but I'm just curious.
Well, I mean, like I'll a lot of times pray the mysteries of the Rosary, which are more in tune with what the liturgical season is. So like right now, like I'll often, try and say, like, the thing is we drive so much around here, so like that's a perfect time to say the rosary.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it's like easy to say multiple rosaries in a day.
Yeah.
And so like if I know I'm gonna be saying more than 5 decades, I'll try to always say the joyful, because right now we're in the time of Advent, which is the joyful mysteries.
Yeah.
But then, so yeah, I guess I let the liturgical season kind of guide a lot of what's the mysteries that I'm going to be focusing on. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
No, that's perfect. And actually, so you have a very active daily routine, and not necessarily in the sense of, every single day is the same, but you're always doing a lot each and every day. Is there one thing in your daily life, one little thing that serves as proof of God's faithfulness and blessing in your life? Like, it's just a constant reminder, something that most people like wouldn't necessarily see, or they might overlook, but for you, you're like, man, that's so good.
Well, that's a good question. Well, like, I'd have to say, I don't know, this is just the answer that comes to mind, but
Yeah, please.
the thing that probably more than anything kind of gives me like an inspiration every single day is something which happened when I was in the seminary, which was actually when I was studying philosophy. And in our seminary, we study St. Thomas Aquinas heavily, and so everything is like based off like the scholastic methods. Yeah. And so we were studying, and I was in my first year of philosophy, and I was writing a paper on it's for the term paper, and it was for this class which is called cosmology or natural philosophy of nature. And I had to we just had all these topics we could pick from, and basically one of the topics was about contingency. And I don't know if you like studied any of this stuff or whatever, but sorry, this is a long story.
I'd like to, but I haven't yet.
Sure. Okay, so
you got time, please.
Okay, good. So yeah, when I was going to college, I just went to a community college up in Idaho, and so when I was in there, just one day, that was when I was really kind of getting back to my faith. And when I was there, randomly my ethics teacher, who was a Catholic, passed out to everybody the 5 proofs for the existence of God given by St. Thomas Aquinas. And she told us, she said, there was this Catholic saint and philosopher and theologian, Thomas Aquinas, who I knew. I was like, oh, I know him.
I know that name.
Yeah, and actually that's a very significant part of my whole conversion, was through St. Thomas. But I heard about, I said, oh, St. Thomas? And then she said, and he said that he wrote these 5 proofs which indisputably prove that God exists. And I was like, couldn't believe it. Like St. Thomas, like the greatest theologian, he wrote these ways that you can't deny that God exists. Yeah. So I was like so excited. I'd never even heard of this before. Yeah. And my friend Josh, he's not Catholic, some kind of Christian or something. But anyways, so afterwards I saw him after class, and we went to the student union building. I said, we have to read these right now. These prove that God exists. Yeah. And so we sat there, and I read the first way, and it was kind of a little bit disappointing. And then the second way, just not much better. And then the third way was just, I thought, the dumbest thing I'd ever. I thought it was so. And the fourth way, I had zero clue what I was talking about. And the fifth way was okay, that one's makes a little sense. But it was so disappointed and so deflated. And that always bothered me, because I remember Josh was sitting there. I thought I'm gonna finally convince Josh and convert him. Yeah. And then all of a sudden this totally just this whole plan fell flat. Out. Yeah. So I was so anyway, so then years later, when I was in the seminary, my second year in philosophy, all of a sudden now we're studying philosophy. And I got this chance to study the third way, the one that I thought was the silliest of all the ways. Yeah. Which was called the proof from contingency, from contingent being. Did you remember that was when you were studying, you're oh, this one was the worst. Okay. And so that's why I was actually really excited to get to write this paper, because I felt by this point, fortunately, I had learned, if there's ever something that St. Thomas says that I don't understand, then it's not because St. Thomas was saying something wrong. It's because I don't understand it. And so, I just decided. Humility. Well, yeah, still got a long way to go. But so I decided I'm going to really delve into this. So I started, and I remember I just was spending literally hours in my room in the seminary just reading, thinking about what he was saying, and I wasn't getting it. And then one of my classmates, James, he said, I told him, James is a genius. I said, James, I can't, this is not clicking for me at all. He said, oh, I just found this old book from the early 1900s. It's one of the greatest philosophy manuals I've ever seen. I said, can I borrow it? He said, yeah. So he gave it to me. And so then all of a sudden things started the way that this writer, his name was Cardinal Mercier, he was writing in this manual of philosophy, like I was like getting it. Like I was getting his train of thought, and so then I was going sentence by sentence. Basically, every word packed this like amazing amount of information. I sit there, think, process it. Okay, like this is what he means. Okay, the next line, this is what he means, and it all just like follows like a sequence, like a perfect sequence of logic. And then finally, like I got to this point, and I was like, I hit this wall, and I just couldn't grasp it. And I was actually just standing in my room in the seminary, just hitting my head on the wall, not hard, but just like sitting there, just trying to figure out what is he saying? Like, what does this mean?
Yeah.
And then, like, I remember, like, the moment that it clicked, it was so life-changing.
Yeah.
And I actually, like, I fell on the floor. I mean, like, but like I just like sank down because I saw what St. Thomas was saying. And then one of our priests, the way that he puts it is he had this similar moment, and he called his dad afterwards, and he said, "Dad, I don't believe in God anymore." And his dad, "Why?" He said, "Because now I don't believe in God because now I know that God is here, and it's no longer faith that I believe." And of course, this is different than the belief in the Trinity, but in the existence of God, when you actually go by the proofs of St. Thomas and you actually follow them and do the hard work of unraveling what he's saying, it was the only thing that I can liken it to is Moses seeing God in the burning bush. And because that's ultimately when God reveals his name to Moses in the burning bush, God was revealing his essence, which is what St. Thomas gets us to. And so like from that moment, I mean, my life can never be the same. And the thing is, I believe in God, but to like actually, I mean, to go through that process of like actually like understanding that there has to be God, that he is real. And you know it through your reason. It's something, like I said, that can never change. And so I think about it probably every day.
For that click, and for you to just like be consumed by that feeling, and just that's cool. That's really cool.
Thanks.
That's a really, really good story. I don't know if story is the right word because it's truth,
a story.
but yeah, it's a story.
Yeah.
What at what point were you raised in the church, like with your family?
Yeah, my family's very devout.
Okay, and then for you personally, was it just less of it was like a thing you did with the family, and then for a while, but eventually turned into like, you know, pursuing this actual relationship, or what kind of kick started you looking back into your faith?
Yeah,
because I think it'd be an interesting point, because as a priest now, like I think a lot of people assume that like priests are just like from the start, they're like they love it and they're devout and that's what they want to do, but that's not the case.
Yeah, no, it was not the case. And I was born and raised in most of my life in Sacramento, California. So, and then eventually when I was in high school, my family moved to Idaho. But growing up, my parents were just very conservative Catholic, and we just went to the Catholic school. And I don't know, I was just a very like high energy, like spastic little kid. Yeah. And
I feel you on that, by the way.
Well, yeah, there's many of us. And so then I don't know, I just went through school, and the thing was at the school I went to, just the reality is that Catholicism was not like the highest priority. It's just the reality. Yeah. And so, it just wasn't really on my radar because you're so heavily influenced by your friends who you're with. And so many of my friends, in their family life, it wasn't important. Yeah. Many of my classmates, they want to go to Mass on Sundays. And so Aristotle says that if there's two laws, a law of the household versus a law of society, then the kids will follow the law of society more often than the law of the household. And that's exactly what happened. Like, I just was so influenced by my friends, and I just started to see Catholicism as just, the thing which, ruined my Sundays. Because all my friends would hang out and do all these fun things, and I could never go because we had to go to Mass. And my parents were, they really fought to try and they catechized us well, but I just was not attracted to the faith because I was just attracted to the world. Yeah. And so then we moved up to Idaho, and at that point, right around that time, my parents started going to Latin Mass. They found a Fraternity of St. Peter community, which I just despised. I could not stand the Latin Mass.
You're like, I didn't like it before, and now I don't understand it while I'm there.
Yeah. Oh. No, that was like literally what happened. There was actually, I don't know if you ever heard of the French existentialist philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre.
No, but
he's really,
please.
Well, anyways, Jean-Paul Sartre, he's really interesting because he was just the existentialist. I can't help but like him, but they were all just about. I mean, they lived through World War II. They saw the horrors that mankind can inflict upon each other, and they just basically came up with this notion that there can't be a God because look at how much evil is in the universe. And anyway, but they ask a lot of interesting questions. Jean-Paul Sartre, he was raised in France, which had a very Catholic culture when he was growing up. But one of the things he remembered, I read that he said he remembers about Catholicism, was that all that he remembers was being around a teenager and having to go to Mass, and his knees were killing him, but he had to kneel down on this hard floor during Mass, and he just hated it. And that was, sorry, it's like another tangent.
No, please go.
Because when I was in seventh grade, I got this really common knee thing. It's called, I was always told it was called Osgood's slaughter.
Okay.
Which it means that the cartilage in your knee grows at a different pace than your bone or something.
Oh.
So a lot of teenagers will have these big bumps on their knees.
Okay.
And it's really painful. And so we went from being in the normal diocesan Mass to also my parents joined this community down there in California, and they were in the process of building a church, but they didn't have it yet. So we were just in a gymnasium and kneeling on linoleum, and my knees were killing me. And it was hot, and the priest was facing towards the tabernacle, and it was in Latin. And it's
the worst.
It was the worst. And I wanted to have nothing. I just basically after the first time I said, this is it. When I turn 18, I'm done going to Mass. When I move out, I'm not going anymore. So, anyways, what was the question? I guess
you're pretty much covering it, but I basically asked, what was that turning point that you finally started looking back into your faith? Because what a beautiful contrast to go from hot, sweaty, priest isn't even looking at me and my knees are killing me, I hate this, to what you had said previously when we just started, man, daily Mass is so life-giving. I love the reality of that. But yeah, what was that thing that kind of turned you back on to your faith?
Yeah. So basically then I went through high school, and just my parents went full on Latin Mass, all about it, the full lifestyle. They joined our parish up in Idaho and were really foundational in helping build it. In the meantime, I just was rebelling against them. I would go to Sunday Mass with them, but that was it.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to have nothing to do with it. I mean, I was just a punk. So anyways, then basically I got to age 17, and I was going to the public school, and up there in just this little town in Idaho, and I love Idaho. I love Idaho so much. It's so beautiful. But so I was loving life insofar as I got to have all this fun, but it became I was still pretty empty on the inside. And the thing I started to notice was that a lot of my friends and a lot of the kids I was at school with were also not really fulfilled. Of course, you don't really even know what that means when you're 17, but
right.
But the thing that I was aware of certain unhappiness, and in the meantime, we got this priest up there at our parish. He's kind of well known in the whole traditional Catholic world. His name is Father Ripperger.
Okay.
Anyways, so a lot of people will listen to talks given by him, and he used to teach at our seminary, and he is an expert on the teachings of St. Thomas Aquinas. And so Father Ripperger would go up there, and he would give what were equivalents to seminary lectures based off of just the teaching of St. Thomas. And St. Thomas is so precise and so clear about everything he says. And he was just the master. And also this included diagnosing all of the conditions of the human soul. And this priest was up there saying, basically, I don't have specific examples, but if you are committing this sin, this will be the side effects. This is how you'll feel. This is how you'll act. And I was that's me. That's also all these. And there was there were times where he was up there preaching, and he's a very good preacher. You can't help but just be riveted.
Yeah.
And so I'd be sitting there, and so even though I didn't care about the Mass, I had I didn't notice that there was beautiful music. I didn't notice anything else. But the fact was there was this preacher, and he was just saying he was just diagnosing my soul and diagramming it, and also the souls of all those kids around me, because I was seeing. That's the thing, is I'd see all these kids around me, and then all of a sudden Father would be up there saying these things, and I'd be that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And so then and there's some times where I literally, I'm not kidding, that I would think that Father had seen me out with my friends, like out doing bad things.
Whatever you're doing.
And like I thought, like literally, like he saw me, and he was friends with my parents. He's gonna come tell my parents. Like he preached a sermon to like get me, and he's gonna come talk to my parents afterwards. And I mean, I really thought that. It was so. But that's the thing is about the truth, is that the truth is, it's universal. I mean, like if it's true, then it's true. And it was St. Thomas just nails human nature. And so like this priest was just speaking to something which I could not deny. This started like really like making me like think about Catholicism. And then basically, went to my senior year of high school, and started to, I mean, externally, like everything seemed fine, but it was like the most miserable I'd ever been in my whole life. And then like, I mean, I was kind of just chasing after all the things that the world offers you. Yeah. And they were clearly leaving me empty. Yeah. And and that's like, I mean, it's weird to describe it that way, or it's not weird, but I mean, the thing is like, it feels so, like that's how it really feels, like empty. And so I just thought, oh man, what's going on? And so then meanwhile, this priest is up here saying all this stuff. And then on Easter Sunday of that year, it was like this grace, finally just like something clicked, and all like, it just became, I was like, I have to change. And then, so that Sunday, basically everything just started to change. And it was a long process. Yeah. But I mean, I guess it's a pretty short process, and like the long,
I'm sure it felt long.
Yeah. But like, it was like, just things, I mean, I just had to start to separate myself from all of my friends. And especially as I got into college, very quickly, I saw, when you're in high school, you live in this kind of this false reality. You're being, people are going to take care of you when you're in high school. And so far as they're going to force you to go to class, they're going to force you to like stay responsible, like to a certain degree. But as soon as you're 18, you're out of high school, you're on your own. If you want to become a loser, like that's up to you.
All bets are off.
Yeah. And it's like, and so I got kind of scared, like, because I realized this, and so that's part of the reason why I just went to college, because I didn't know what else to do. Yeah. So I just started going to this community college. I figured at least I won't be just totally spinning my wheels. Yeah. But then in the meantime, I saw all these kids from my high school, just their lives just spiraling, just instantly. I mean, I couldn't believe it, just how quickly it was going badly for so many people. So all that kind of basically worked together just to convince me more and more of just the truth about like what the church teaches. And then eventually, I first had to get my own life straightened out. And then I started to get it straightened out. And then eventually that's where I started to like hear the call towards the priesthood. So
I love the fact that it was the philosophy side of it that intrigued you first. Like it kind of, because you're like, oh, he's calling me out. Like this is me, and how that led naturally to it. Because I think there's a natural, for those people that have a bad taste in their mouth about religion, right? Whether it's Catholicism or another version of Christianity, I think there's just like some bad taste, some aversion to church, and they don't want anything to do with it. But something like that, like you were saying, you're watching your buddies as you're sitting there, and it just kind of clicked in your mind. It doesn't matter what you believe in or what you want to sit down and be like, oh, I'll go to church or not or whatever. If someone's up there and they're saying exactly how you feel and they're dissecting it for you, it's hard not to be like, well, hold on, there might be something there. Yeah. And he knows exactly what's going on. And it's like, there's got to be something more. Yeah. And I love that.
No, it's true. And that was when I was in, well, I guess like a couple things. But for one thing, when a lot of people think about like the old church, like, especially like the traditional Latin Mass and all those traditions of the church, there's a lot of times you'll encounter people who, if they're older, like that was part of their childhood, they hate it. Like there's a certain hatred towards the old, because they have this idea that it was so rigid and, well, just rigid, just made their lives miserable. Yeah. And it's I mean, there's a lot of people who, especially there's a lot of parents who misapplied church teachings to their families and just used the teachings of the church to basically be that thing which crushed like all joy in their kids' lives, because they didn't know what else, like they saw, on the one hand, they probably might see that their kids are doing some things which might lead them down a bad road, but they don't know how to address them, so then they just say, that's a sin, and then they just will shut them down. And
it's good intention, but it didn't go the right way.
And maybe misapplied, and also some people, I don't know, it's very complicated, but the reason I bring this up is that a lot of people have this sort of fear of the traditional, the whole like traditional lifestyle teachings, all that. But the thing that I found is that if you read St. Thomas and like you read what the church had taught, and like the way that the church had formed priests for so many centuries, I've never been more convinced in my life that something is true than studying the moral theology that comes from St. Thomas Aquinas. Yeah. Like it's of so many things in my life. There's another tangent, but when I was a little kid, I remember hearing one time that you could never be certain about anything. I don't know what that was, but like I just remember this. I remember hearing somewhere like on TV or something that no one can ever be 100% certain about something. And so for some reason that always stuck with me. And I don't know, anyway, point is, with St. Thomas's moral theology, I remember something that struck me is that I've never been more certain about anything in my life than that this is true. It's so true.
Yeah.
So it's and the thing is, like, it's so gentle and it's so good for our souls, and there's nothing that's rigid about it. It's merciful. It's the only thing that can make you happy. So
I love how you make the point of mentioning our souls. And you said just a couple minutes ago, he was diagnosing the traditional priest who was speaking was diagnosing the condition of our souls, because I think a lot of times, and especially nowadays, like unfortunately, anxiety and depression have become such a big thing. And everyone is looking for, at the end of the day, everyone wants the same thing. They want peace and they want to feel like happy and loved and like they're doing something.
Right.
But back to the anxiety and depression, like everyone feels it, but then they look for something to fix it. Yep. And more often than not, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with this stuff. I'll preface it by saying that, but like, it's almost like, taking the medicine versus actually addressing the problem, sort of thing.
Yeah.
But like, so there's nothing wrong with like affirmations, like people do that all the time, or like there's a lot of good stuff, but it's a deeper condition. Mm-hmm. It's a condition of the soul, and if it's not addressed that way, then and that's not to say it's fixed it and then you never have problems again, because we both know that's not how that works.
Right. Yeah.
But if you never get down to like the deeper level of it, then you never like realize that you can never fully realize the peace that's possible.
Yep.
And I just, the way you said it rang very, very well. It sat very well with me. But it's the condition of our souls.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Thank God. And it's you're completely right. I mean, it's again like it just all stems from you have to know why you exist. Yeah. And if you don't know what you're made for, which is that you're made for God, then you can't be happy, and you'll never have peace.
Was it St. Thomas Aquinas or St. Ignatius of Loyola? Because honestly...
It was St. Augustine who you're thinking of, but...
Probably. The spiritual, it's either the 15 steps of like spiritual discernment or
that might be St. Ignatius. Sorry, I thought you were going to say another quote.
Oh, yeah, okay. But it's 15 stages of spiritual discernment or something like that. I forget the actual...
The discernment of spirits.
Yes, yeah. And something so I was at a very interesting time in my life when a friend of mine, actually Michael, put me onto it. And I a little plug.
Yeah.
And I listened through all 15. I have the audio version. And something that really struck me and really stuck with me, which brings it kind of full circle back to how you were saying, if you don't have a routine, then you're done for, because life gets really difficult sometimes, and having that routine is critical. But he talks about how you're going to experience moments of spiritual consolation and spiritual desolation, and how God's grace works in those moments and how the enemy works in those moments. It's very different things, and the ability to recognize, am I in a moment or am I in a time or period of spiritual consolation or desolation, in order to move forward and discern what the best plan of action is critical. But the thing that has stuck with me most, like, I don't know what the adjective I'm looking for is, but the thing that stuck out the most was never make a decision or never change a decision in a moment of spiritual desolation that you made in a moment of spiritual consolation.
Yeah.
And it was just one of those things, because I know, like in my own personal life, there's been, when you're feeling good and when you're at peace and whatnot. And there's been a lot of really great times when I've been able to come up with oh, hey, maybe I'm going to start doing this. I need to start working on this or something like that.
Right.
And then, a day later, 2 days later, or even 5 minutes later, it's like, oh man, you really start questioning it. And then it's that recognition to be able to pause and be like, hold on.
Right.
I made that decision, whether, and you might have had someone you're talking to, or a mentor or something, but I made that decision in peace, in a moment of spiritual consolation. And I have to recognize like this moment of feeling like all over the place, I just have to stick to that decision I made.
Right.
And that's not to say that decision's permanent, because later on it might grow, it might develop or something else. But in a moment of spiritual desolation, hold to the routine, hold on to whatever it is, and just keep going.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the Jesuits were amazing. They were the greatest spiritual directors like the church ever had. And St. Ignatius, he came up with those, developed those rules for the discernment of spirits, and it's so practical, and it's so important, because those things are, he went through it all himself. That's how he developed them. And yeah, they if you follow them, they will guide you very well. So.
What was the St. Augustine thing that you thought I was going to say?
Oh, I thought you were going to say that our hearts are restless. Our hearts were created for thee, O God, and they will be restless until they rest in thee. So, sorry, I thought. What you were gonna say.
That's perfect. That ties into exactly what we were talking about.
Right.
That couldn't be more true. Is there something that having now you're fully devoted to the traditional practices of the church and whatnot. Is there something that you've learned that you didn't learn in seminary, you didn't learn while studying your particular, I'm trying to think of the word, but you didn't learn studying, and you actually learned from like one of your parishioners about the traditional side of the faith?
Oh, interesting. Something I learned from one of the parishioners about the traditional side. Well, I guess, more of like a general answer would be, in my last assignment, which was in this little tiny town in Kansas, I lived there for 3 years. The parish, I would say, is 95% blue collar. The average family size was 7 kids. Wow. It was amazing. There's many families that were 9, 10 kids, some families that were 14, 15 kids.
That's awesome.
No twins or anything like that. So it's
crazy.
It's a different world.
Yeah.
But basically, so many of these people moved out to the middle of nowhere in Kansas, because it was in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
And they sacrificed places that they loved. They sacrificed being close to their extended family. They made all these huge sacrifices because they wanted to, for one thing, give their kids a life out in the country. They don't want to be in a city, because there's a lot of benefits to having a kid raised on some sort of like a farm life. Just keeps you connected to reality, which is becoming harder and harder to do. But aside from that, they just wanted their kids to be in a community, like a parish community, where everybody there was as serious as they were about the faith. And so that's what a lot of people will find in our communities, is that people will move. They'll make all these sacrifices so that they can raise their kids there and have the full experience of being in a parish where everybody's on fire for the faith. And that's what this parish was. It's called St. John Vianney Church. And the thing was, I guess I learned from my parishioners was that sometimes I feel bad for them. They moved, they missed their homes where they had been raised for who knows how long. Yeah. And I just sometimes almost lament to him, just say, sorry, I know this is hard for you in Kansas, because Kansas, sorry parishioners, is not it's not a super beautiful place. That's
okay. That's fair. But you are in Southwest Florida right now, so it's hard to beat. Yeah. So that's understandable.
Yeah. No, but it's Kansas. I actually surprisingly do miss it. Even from its geographic features sometimes. Yeah. Sometimes. But those people made this sacrifice to move out there. A lot of them are just working hard blue collar jobs, single incomes. The moms want to homeschool their kids, be there for their kids. They're making these tremendous sacrifices. To the point where I could never preach to these people about giving more. There's nothing more that they've given everything. And if I ever even intimated that the church might need something, instantly the entire parish would volunteer anything that they had spare. In fact, with all this, so the church was quickly being outgrown.
Yeah.
It was exploding. The community was absolutely exploding.
Yeah.
And the church, we were having to add on mass after mass after mass, and like, just we couldn't do it anymore.
Right.
There's no room, and so we needed to expand the church. And this all happened right during like the COVID stuff, and this happened during the stimulus packages.
Yeah.
And the pastor said, like, these people could use that money. I mean, they could seriously. These people are sacrificing already, and now they're going to get all this money to take care of their families. And you know, who knows what the economy is going to do. And so the pastor said from the pulpit, he just said, okay, right now with all these stimulus packages coming out, if everybody gave their stimulus money, we could like quadruple the size of the church right now. Like we could do it if everybody did it right now, have no debt and get it done.
Yeah.
And you know, it's up to you guys if you want it. And then we got all the money right away. Everybody gave everything, and then some. They were already and so now the church it's finished. They dedicated it 2 weeks ago, so the whole church is built now. Like it's big enough to actually hold the parish now. So
that's incredible.
Yeah, and so basically what I learned to answer this is another roundabout answer.
No,
but
I love it.
That I learned from these people that it's the traditional liturgy is worth the sacrifice, basically. To like these people, they would never say that they regretted their decisions.
Wow.
That it's hard. They would never say it was easy.
Right.
That they missed a lot of these things that they made sacrifices for, but they wanted to stick it out because it was going to successfully transmit the faith to another generation, which is they themselves had the realization of how important it is to have the faith. And probably most of these people weren't raised traditional. They'd come to it like to see the beauty in the church's tradition, and just they've basically seen how well the traditions of the church passed on the faith. I mean, it's what our forefathers did since the beginning. It was these traditions, and so these people. This is what I saw in college: is this recognition that this is what the saints. This is what made saints for 2,000 years. Was this mass, this breviary, this chant, these sacraments. These have been the things which the faith has conquered the world. And it will continue to do so. There's no reason why it should ever stop.
Yeah.
And so these people realize it. They realize how important it is. And so they're willing to make that sacrifice. And it doesn't matter how hard it is, like they're willing to make it for their kids. And so it's kind of just it was always like a reminder to me of like when I was in college, how important it was for me to go to mass, but then just realizing that like this is not just something nice that I do, but this is actually like essential to everything to do it. So
what are you most proud of in maybe it's within the parish and the church in Kansas, but it could be at any point in your priesthood, but what are you most proud of?
What am I most proud of?
Yeah.
My pride.
Let me preface it by saying I think there's a difference between having pride and pridefulness.
Yeah,
sure. Because like you were saying, like the initiative taken by the clergy and by the lay people for the past 2,000 years has been what created saints and whatnot. And I think there's a very good sense of pride in being a part of that. So that's where the question's coming from. And I'm wondering for you specifically.
Yeah, I guess the thing that I'm most happy with that I've got to do as a priest has been just getting to basically to teach classes, but especially to like the youth. And we had a little school, so we had like from basically kindergarten and then kind of through high school, and getting to like really learn about how to teach children, but just realizing that if we catechize them very well, like more, I mean, it's not just a rote memorization. I mean, the rote memorization is actually a very important thing, but it's like, because if you don't know it, if it's not in your mind, then you can't know it.
Yeah, so, that's helpful.
Yeah, it's super important. But also like turning that memorization into living it and realizing that it's good. And so I guess getting to teach for 3 years there, and now here I do a lot of stuff with all the kids and the adults in the parish too, like basically making people understand why the church teaches what she does, and that all these teachings are beautiful, and also the way to happiness is like my favorite thing as a priest, I think. So
that's cool.
Yeah.
Is there Is there a specific example, and I know you said honest with the entire community in Kansas, is there a specific example with a parishioner, whether it's in Kansas or here in Naples or before that, that's really stuck with you, like kind of seeing their transformation through the traditional church?
Well, I mean, there are many.
Okay.
And it's just kind of, if I had to say it, put it this way, like a lot of people have their first fervor when they find the Catholic faith, like realize like they have that first awakening to the goodness of the church.
Yeah.
And of the faith. And so the thing is about the traditional community and the whole traditional life is that it gives you the best tools to maintain that, sustain it, and to actually help it grow.
Yeah.
And so I've seen so many people, and just I've like been a priest for 3.5 years, in just that time, who have, because of the fact that they stuck with what the church has developed as far as leading our souls, because they stuck with that in the traditional world, they've actually overcome obstacles that they were going through, and now they're actually happy and they feel free to do the good that God made them to do. So that's been, and I've seen that with, it happened in my own life, and I've seen it with so many others. Many people, just that because they stick with what's tried and true and time tested, and it works to actually make us free, like free to do the good that God made us to do.
Yeah. And I think it almost, in a way, you can tell me your thoughts or if I'm way off here, but I think in a way it gives people permission to dissect themselves, in the sense of, I don't think I would be far off in saying that a lot of people would shy away from asking themselves the difficult questions, would shy away from really diving into, why do I feel this way? What's going on in my life? What is it that's caused me to feel the way I feel, act the way I do, think the way I think? Because in doing that, you're opening Pandora's box, and it's pretty much never ending at that point. It keeps going. But the traditional church, along with the philosophy that you've been able to study, it doesn't center around that. Obviously, it's centered around God and the Eucharist, but it almost makes it a necessity. And by making it a necessity, it allows people to. It's like, hey, it's okay to, like, if you ask, basically shows people that the outcome of those questions and those difficult times of discernment and thinking into it is ultimately good, really good. And it's not something to shy away from. It's not something to be scared of. It's something that the moment you begin, it might be a little scary at first, because you're going to learn a whole lot about yourself that you never thought.
Right.
But once you dive into that, it's like, it's okay.
Yeah.
Like that's what the whole point of God's love for us is to then grow closer to God and be more like Him, and to just kind of let all the chips fall and just.
Yeah. No, that's was one of the most, like, kind of important things for me that kind of led me back to the church, is that I'd never liked ambiguous answers, like when I was in high school. I just wish, like, sometimes people would just tell me, like, what they thought, and so I didn't like it when people would just not say what they thought. So the thing was, like, for myself, if I'm doing something, like, I have all this consternation in my soul because like, I'm living a disordered life. If you don't ever tell me, like, you have to stop doing this, this, and this, because those things are bad for you, and those things are making your soul sick, and you're going to be miserable until you stop doing that. If no one ever told me that, then I don't know how long it might take me to figure out, if I ever will figure it out. And so the thing was, again, this is like a huge criticism of the old church, but is that there was, like, this just too much black and white, too much rigidity, all these different things. That there's mercy in being told that, like, this is bad for you. Stop. Like this is like a cancer in your soul. And so the thing was, I needed that. And I've had it so many times as a priest where somebody comes to me and it might be in the confessional, it might be just they stop me on the street and they'll say, like, they'll ask me some difficult thing, Father, this is what's happening in my life. It might be this addiction, this sin I'm struggling with, like this thing. Is that wrong? And this might be somebody who's like been away from the church for 40 years.
Yeah.
Do I have to stop doing this? And it's no priest ever gets enjoyment out of saying, yeah, you need to stop. Because like, somebody who's been doing this sin for 40 years, who's 40 years and rooted in this thing, your whole life is going to be built around it, or it's going to be built into every aspect of your life. The priest never looks forward to saying, yeah, that's wrong. But when you say it, yes, that is a sin. People you can see it. It's a certain shock, and a certain fear, but also it's like a relief, because now they've just been like all of a sudden realize, okay, like if I know, because they recognize in themselves there's something wrong. Yeah. And and now like they see like this might be the solution to fixing it. Right. And it's a scary thing, because if you have to do the difficult work of rooting out and replacing with a good habit, that takes a lot of work. But I mean, it's like, do you want to heal or not? So anyway, so just that very clear yes or no, like, I don't know. That's just, for me, like a very important thing.
No, I love that. I love that. And two things you said, and we're pretty much wrapped up on our time, actually. So,
all right.
So that's perfect. But I'll finish off just by kind of reiterating two things you said. One, and now I'm going to forget one. But
okay.
But the one you said, rooting it up and replacing it with something good, because which is key. It's critical. And there's the passage in Scripture, and I don't know exactly where it's from, but it talks about the man who had 7 demons living inside of him, and they left, but he didn't replace it with anything.
Right.
And so they came back like 10 times worse.
Exactly.
And it's a thing of like you said, when it's I don't know if infected is the right word, but when it's something that's infected every area of our life, and our life's kind of circled around it, we remove it, but we have to replace something. Yeah. Like there's something good has to go in its place. Right. And that opportunity, it's kind of like in limbo, because you take out the sin, and then it's like, what you gonna do? Right. You gonna do something good with it, or
exactly.
And that was the other thing, and the mercy in being straightforward.
Yeah.
And just being like, yeah, it's not good. Right. You shouldn't be doing that. It's not helping you out.
Yeah. I mean,
of course, not saying it that way.
No, it's the reality is like, it's amazing how much the analogy carries over from our physical body to our soul, but it's so almost direct that, if you went to a doctor and you had some cancer that was going to kill you, and a doctor sees it, and then he just doesn't want to tell you because it might make you feel bad, and he does nothing about it, that doctor will kill you, and you will die whether or not you might feel, okay, great, I don't have cancer, and then it's just going to, it will kill you. Yeah. And so it's the same thing for the priest. If we see, it's really true. If you see something which is against what God made you for, and the priest doesn't say something, then he's condemning your soul to death. So it is merciful. It's merciful on the doctor's part to have to do the hard work of breaking the news to someone. Yeah. But it's the truth, and we need the truth. Yeah. So, yeah.
And we're better to wrap this up in the truth, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thank you so much. I wish we had more time, honestly.
No, thank you very much.
But seriously, thank you so much for being on with us. Massive shout out to Maria Vision. Thank you very much for helping Guadalupe put this together to bring it to you guys. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, thank you.